Okay, good evening, everyone. Let's call to order here for our meeting of February 22nd, 2021. So with that, I'm going to start tonight with a roll call. So when I call your name, if you could please unmute if you're muted and just acknowledge your presence. Ruben.
Present.
Jonathan.
Present.
Chris.
Present.
Jeremy. Jeremy? Unmute and just say hello. You with us, Jeremy? I got a thumbs up from Jeremy. Danielle. Danielle?
Here.
Thank you. And that covers all of us here so far this evening. I'm going to start with minutes. Everybody have an opportunity to review minutes?
Oh, but I think I figured out the mute button.
There we go. Any comments, questions about last month's minutes? Not seeing anything. I'm going to change this out around a little bit nowadays rather than voting on it. I'm just going to say, are there any objections to minutes from our January meeting? I'm not seeing any objections, so the minutes are hereby approved. Thank you for that. Our next section is public comments. I'm not actually seeing anyone with us from the community here this evening. And Jeff, have you received any emails or anyone from the community that wanted to make a comment?
Thanks, Brad. No public comments given to me in regards to park board meeting tonight.
Okay. Public comments are closed. So we really only have one regular business item this evening covering two areas, which is going to be Hillside Park and Blackberry Park. Project update on that. We're actually having some public engagement coming up here later this week on that. So Jeff, it looks like this is your show.
I will take this item. Thanks, Brad. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, we, as you know, as we've reviewed our 2021 work plan, these two projects are high priority for City Council and Mayor as they adopted the 2021 budget. Both involve primarily play areas. One at Hillside Park, really stemming from some extensive public engagement in 2014, and then as well Blackberry Park, which is a relatively new park to the city of Issaquah. It was transferred from King County in 2017. I thought tonight would be a great opportunity before we even have our public engagement, just to have a discussion and share with you the approach that we're taking to these projects, and also the approach that we're taking to our neighborhood engagement effort. What I thought I'd do is give you all a sneak peek to the presentations that we're going to be giving on Wednesday night the 24th. For those in the audience that are listening, we have a WebEx virtual meeting for Hillside Park, and then the next evening, Thursday night, the 25th of February, we have a WebEx virtual meeting in regards to Blackberry Park. So I'm going to try and be tech savvy here and share my screen. I'd love a thumbs up once I do this. Are you all seeing a Hillside Park play area photo? Yep, great. All right, so like I said, I think this is really a fun chance to share with you approach that we're taking. I believe I shared in January that we've gone through a selection process. We've selected Methuen Architects as our consultant team to help us with this. We've been working with them on site analysis, the historical just materials, community outreach we've heard from both of these parks, as well as really looking at and taking a newer approach to play in these park spaces and play areas. Like I said, these are our presentations that we're going to share with the community. I'll go over Hillside Park first and then open it up for just feedback and questions and thoughts that you all might have. Both these projects are similar in that we're looking at play areas, but I think what you'll find is that the sites themselves have some real unique elements and unique discussions that we want to have with the community. So Hillside Park first, both evenings Mayor Polly will be joining us, so she'll open up with some comments and a welcome to the community. My goal in sharing all this info with you tonight is not necessarily to get your feedback on the questions we're going to be asking, but really, or the questions themselves, but really just the format and flow in what you think of this. The agenda for the evening, particularly Hillside Park, will be really starting with the 2014 feedback we heard from the community. That will really serve as the baseline and is serving for the baseline of the project here at Hillside Park. We'll also spend some time talking about the site analysis and the environmental conditions that we're aware of. Then we'll talk about siting options based upon that initial site analysis and environmental conditions. We'll then talk quite a bit about play and what play means, and go through a series of questions and community feedback. We'll be using some technology where we can get some real-time feedback that night as to experience, character, how do we best blend this play area into the natural environment there at Hillside Park. What you'll see in the presentation is we'll be certainly reinforcing that idea. We're going to talk with the community about sort of different polling links and opportunities we're going to have while the meeting's going on. I'll also note, and we'll share both evenings, we're going to be recording each of these meetings and giving the community an opportunity over the next week to watch and to provide their feedback from us. So we thought that was really important to not only get live feedback that night, but then through really recording the event, give opportunity for other neighbors, community members that aren't able to attend to give us feedback as well. So there'll be a mix of utilizing the chat box. We'll have some polling, live chat polling going on, as well as another tool called Mentimeter. As the agenda says, we're going to dive into talking about analysis. In regards to Hillside Park, really that analysis starts with the 2014 community feedback and discussion that we had. Specific to the play area, there was a real interest in a play area, more natural play and materials that really blend into the environment and blend into the aesthetic of Hillside Park. These gorgeous, you see the photo here, tall cedar trees, and really that meadow, forested meadow feel. How do we create play that really blends into that doesn't interfere or take away from current features of the park? Circulation was another theme that we'll go over in terms of trails, accessibility, view and surveillance into these areas, some drainage issues that existed within the field. So just reinforcing what we heard in 2014 as the starting point. And then you'll see as I go through these presentations, these opportunities for chat where we'll really be queuing up the community to provide us any other info. In this case, what's missing or have priorities changed for the individuals that are listening in. We'll spend some time highlighting the project focus. In this case, it really is looking at play and how to incorporate a play area, a rightly scaled play area into this park. As a walk-in park, we're not changing this. We're not creating parking. So we want this to be a play area that really serves in that existing scale of the park. I noticed just even in sharing this all with you, this is still a draft. We are going to also look at ways that we can address some of the drainage as we're siting and locating the play area. So there's still a few changes we need to make to this presentation. Next in the analysis, we really want to dive into some of the environmental realities of the site, of the area. Mithun and their subconsultant team do a great job of really, again, starting big picture, but really honing in on what are the environmental elements of this site. We're also going to talk with the community on Tuesday night about the new environmental checklist, which is part of our project process, introducing how taking a look at the critical areas both on this site and off site that may have buffers within this two acre site are really an important element that we're looking at from the get-go of this project. So we'll spend some time talking about that, again, inviting feedback on other environmental areas or issues that community might be aware of. We'll then talk through this sort of the right side of the screen here talks about considerations and really elements of this environmental checklist that will be important as we go through the process. This first neighborhood engagement is going to lead into a second neighborhood meeting that we'll be having in April, where we'll be bringing back not only feedback on the elements of the play area and the project, but also on the environmental checklist and how, as we're incorporating the project, we're also incorporating in the environmental realities of the site. We'll then spend some time talking about the context of the site itself, starting with this overview of the site. Hillside Park, this orangish area really just being the 2 acres of bigger Hillside, but this 2 acre neighborhood park is where we're looking at incorporating in the play area. Some photos to give context of the site, what exists now, what's some of the feel of the area. We imagine most of the people tuned into this meeting are familiar with the site, but just some opportunities to give context. I mentioned earlier, for those of you that maybe have not been there, this park really has one main walk-in entry point off of Mount McKinley Drive. There's another trail that comes through the cemetery, but it truly is a walk-in space, and that'll be important to how we think about incorporating play into the site. Looking at some other elements of the site, realities of the site, some buffers, the buffer to the cemetery, what buffers look like to the residential areas. Again, some context photos. Areas we're aware of, some critical areas we're very aware of, and we'll need to be reviewing are looking at steep slopes and what setbacks look like there. Again, with some context photos. And then with this context and with some of these environmental realities, at least begin to offer up some feedback and opportunities for community thoughts on where we might consider locating a play area. Each of these areas would have trade-offs that we'll talk through. Again, the idea is not settling on a final site on Wednesday night, but really beginning to invite some feedback from the community in terms of initial thoughts they might have on feel for the site. Another reality is we want to introduce to the neighborhood is given this desire at Hillside in particular of the trees, of so much of the natural experience of Hillside and how we can incorporate play into that natural area is this idea of we can think creatively about how to incorporate play. It doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional one big large play area that's just plopped into a space. But again, beginning to get some feedback and welcoming this idea of maybe we have a concentrated play area, but also this idea of dispersing play throughout the site. We could do it in this sort of play area and then a couple of discovery areas, or even this idea of a series of small play experiences, play areas incorporated and connected either with a trail or throughout the site. And again, just a chance to invite some feedback on that. And then jumping right into these ideas of play and beginning to get some feedback as to how the community would like to consider play. Not all play is the same thing. I know oftentimes we'll look at a play area and just think, oh, play area is a play area. But I think Bethune and this approach of really thinking of play and the variety of play that exists, I think will allow us to create a play space and a play area that really blends into the neighborhood, but also serves that Squak Mountain community really well. Given this is a virtual meeting and we're going to try and get really creative in how to get feedback on ideas and concepts, Bethune does a great job of creating these or providing these images that, again, are not meant to be exact concepts that are going to be as part of Hillside, but really start to welcome and maybe open up some creative thinking or at least some initial visuals for the community to react off of versus just words. I think we all tend to be quite visual in our experiences, and these visuals could certainly help garner community feedback. So again, looking at both types of structures, mix of materials. With Hillside in particular, we really are trying to emphasize some of the natural play, natural woods, rope, netting, nature play, adventure play. Again, I'm not going through this survey like we're going to go through with the community, but you'll just see trying to really invite different ways to think of play, different ways to think of accessibility, family use. Do we want to consider ways of exploration and really inviting creative play as opposed to just the traditional plop and play? How do we want to incorporate seating? How do we want to incorporate art? That's another element that we're looking at and art doesn't have to be, again, just a plopped piece of public art, but how can art be part of play and part of really celebrating what that park is? So that, I believe, is the last slide of this draft of Hillside. I'm going to stop there before jumping into Blackberry. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Well, I'll keep sharing my screen and see if there's any comments or feedback. Brad, I'm not sure if you were able to look at the chat box. Maybe it's easier for me to stop sharing.
No, I can look at the chat box. Right now, there's nothing in there.
Okay. Any general thoughts, feedback? What do you all think of this type of approach?
I have a couple of thoughts.
Yeah.
I like the approach and all the visuals. I think that's really conducive to getting good feedback. Two thoughts though. One, when you mentioned kind of natural play and how that might be really conducive to this, I agree with that. I also remember that was the approach we took with Confluence Park, I think, and what we ended up doing was adding a formal play structure, thinking originally that we didn't need that. So I just want to kind of throw that out as sort of maybe perhaps a lesson learned. And then the other thing is, for as long as I've been on the park board, we have been talking about doing something with Hillside Park. And over the years, we've gotten a lot of resistance from the community up there. And I'm sure a big part of that is not wanting to attract the lack of parking and not wanting to attract people in, pull people in. So I'm just curious, you mentioned the 2014 survey, was that pretty overwhelmingly, are you getting the sense that the community is ready for, an improvement to this park?
Yeah, so 2014 was a series of community meetings that were held up there. You all may recall, and yes, there was, excuse me, real interest in adding a play area to the site. Again, with the caveat of how can it be natural? How can it be incorporated in to a scale that doesn't, we're not creating a community-sized play area that's going to create a destination. And how do we do it in a way that doesn't detract from the existing uses and elements of the park? And so we're going to head into this exercise with that same set of conditions and sort of a baseline. Like any public engagement, Danielle, yeah, I would imagine, and even as I've gotten emails as we've sent this invite out, there's a real mix of feelings and opinions about this park, and whether there's interest in having a play area or not. A lot of interest in create a play area is fine as long as it doesn't take away from the field, or as long as it doesn't take away from the trail. All of that is, I think, pretty natural. And certainly in my years of working in a variety of cities, that's not rare. When we look at incorporating a new element into a park that a community wants, not every member of that neighborhood might want that element, but how do we add that element in a way that also respects the variety of interests and the variety of uses that are already happening within that park.
And how much, so I appreciate that. I just think we need to be really careful to listen to that community carefully. And that community, that neighborhood is different than some of our newer neighborhoods where we really, where like in the Highlands and Talus, where there are really no yards, right? So Squawk has a little bit different. People might have some space for kids in their yards, which might be one reason why we've had some reluctance in the past. How much is this park used kind of informally for off-leash dogs? You guys have a sense as to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't quantify other than to say, yeah, it's an open field. So yes, it is used to a degree for both on-leash and off-leash dog use.
Hey, Jeff, is this a matter of planning only this year, or is there actually funding available to actually do the work?
There's funding actually to do the work. So that's something, I appreciate you asking that. That's something we'll share. The goal would be to have a play area installed in each of these sites this fall.
As well as some upgrades to the trail system too?
I don't know what you mean by upgrades to the trail system. No, I mean, the play area is the primary goal. I think how we can address drainage in the main field at Hillside, again, depending on where we locate the play area, would probably be a goal of this. But in terms of expanding trails, like down to Lower Cemetery area, no, that's not part of this phase of work that would be completed this year. But the nice thing about this engagement is, and hopefully in this approach of really having a conversation with the neighborhood, is, I think, the goal is to get feedback for this phase of work with the play area and how to incorporate it if we're going to do a play area. But then also welcome feedback on other improvements that we might want to accomplish in a future phase.
Chris, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had a few comments, few thoughts. I think it would be wise, even if, sorry, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Maybe that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Let me move this window over here, if I can. I think it would be wise to ask the question of the neighbors and the participants about trails and access. I know a family that lives on Mount McKinley, and they love having it. They love that it's sort of a secret, their own private park. And obviously that's not, not everybody gets to have a private park. But if improvements are made there, then might become a destination, even if it's not a big destination. And if there are greater access points that might be able to alleviate and disperse some of the influx of visitors. And so I think it's worth asking the question and exploring for if it has to be a later phase. That's it. And then the other thing about this park is because it's hidden, it can be home to other activities that are not desirable in a public park. And if you can create those, that influx, that steady movement of people through there, then it can become sort of self-patrolled. And so that's another reason I think we should explore that idea, even if it's not with this phase.
Great points, Chris. Yeah, I think the idea of access, those conversations of how this space functions are all going to be not only questions we ask, but really welcome feedback and discussion. Again, like any public space, as we manage a public park for public use, you're right, we want to do it in a way that's respectful to the neighbors of that public space, but also, again, tries to seek to serve the public use. And again, in this case, this is not a community park that's trying to serve all of Issaquah. It's a neighborhood park that's really trying to serve that neighborhood as best as it can.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge, is to try and find a balance there, because right now I think the only people that are using it are people that really live adjacent to the park for the most part, and the rest of us that live on Squaw Mountain, because of it being so hilly here and there is no real parking or any real good access, a lot of people on Squaw don't use it unless you live next to it. I mean, so I think there's a portion of the community that's going to be very protective because they don't want to lose their private park. But there's also a part of the community that would like to be able to have a park on Squaw Mountain that they could utilize. And so how do you balance that? I guess that's the challenge.
Yeah. And to continue with the idea of trails, and sorry if that's too big of a digression, but so we live further up the hill on Squaw, and my wife and I are out on the mountain all the time. And as of last March, the number of visitors to Squaw Mountain Park probably increased tenfold, if not more. It's great, it's what we all want, people outdoors and everything, but they're, parking all over and going into, the main Squaw Mountain Park. If this area, could be done in a way where you had more access points, there's McKinley, Jupiter, I can't remember all the names, but, Fury, Mount Cedar. If each of those had some little trail accesses and a little network through there, now you've got another place for people to go out and do their walking and move about through the mountain. And the other thing about this that maybe some people don't realize is on Squaw, you have the entrance down kind of by, the mountain park by Sunset, by the hatchery, and then Tibbetts. And it's very hard to get across. And for people to have the opportunity to do walks one way or the other and sort of get through that what's otherwise an obstacle, I think would be valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Great points, Chris.
And I'll drop the whole trail thing now.
That's all right. Please
No, I
don't
love
drop
that.
it.
That would be,
It's a great
that would be
opportunity.
amazing to be able to walk, not have to walk on Newport, right, to cross somehow. Normally, I love the idea at our new parks, have something different and unique and, have some new kind of feature. At this park, I wonder if it might be a good idea to sort of be redundant so that to kind of alleviate the attraction for people outside the neighborhood coming in. So, which is just sort of I don't know, it might be a strategy to think about.
Mm-hmm.
To put features in that we have already at some of our other.
Yeah, it's a great point. All of these are really good feedback in that we're really trying to thread a needle. right? How do we incorporate play into this space? How do we make it unique to the neighborhood? And this probably isn't the right way to put it, but let's not overshoot and end up creating a destination play area within a park that isn't able to support that at this point in time. So this idea of phasing, this idea of but again, keeping it to scale for what this park is. Again, there's many in that community that have asked and requested a play area to be incorporated in Hillside, and we're going to do the best we can to have this neighborhood conversation, really think of play creatively, think of this site creatively, and really try and come up with some options on how play could be incorporated into this park to the right scale and in a way that still blends with existing uses and with the environment.
Yeah, I really will see what the community says, but I really like the concept of spreading it out so it's not just one big play area. Those little ones along the trail, and I think that really helps so that it's not too congested, and gives people some space and maybe even some private space to some extent. So just to clarify, there's not going to be much of any tree loss or excavation in this project?
That would not be our goal. Our goal, so part of our site analysis has been inventorying all trees, and especially trees of significance. There are some hazard trees, but again, identifying those through the work of an arborist consultant. Yeah, but again, the goal is to preserve those trees and create a play area that works within the site. And again, not a lot of excessive grading either, right? Like for any play area, there's some degree of grading, but we're not looking at moving a lot of earth to do that.
And any that occurs would just be for the play area only, not
Precisely.
anywhere else. Like the open field essentially is going to remain what it is?
That would be the goal, yeah. Again, the strong community interest in 2014 in here, let's let that field be the multi-use lawn and space that it is, and then blend a play area to complement it, not take its place.
That's good. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Chris, you still have your hand up.
What would be a comparable size park that we're talking about, like as far as a play area?
In terms of square footage, Danielle, we're not at that point yet. So
No, but for like a neighborhood park, what are our other kind of neighborhood parks that are classified as that?
boy, Blackberry, which we're going to talk about next. Yeah, that's a unique one. I'd say Black Nugget up at Issaquah Highlands, but that's such a different neighborhood, right? It's I think it might be similar in size, but it's very different in terms of recreation amenities, right? It's much more of a developed neighborhood park. I'd say this space is really quite unique. Both it's a neighborhood park, but it's more passive in nature, and I think the community very much wants it to stay that way.
Yes.
I heard a yes.
Yes.
It's more of a green belt with a little bit of a park in it.
Yeah. Yep. And again, I think that's what we're really trying, and this is great feedback, and I think what we're really trying to represent in these conversations is let's let the uniqueness of each of these sites and any site that we do park work on really inform the work that we're going to do, both in scale and environment and sort of the natural resources that exist on that site.
Personally, I think the trails are probably as important, if not more important, than at that particular park than play amenities to some extent. It's because of it being such a natural area. People just having an opportunity to get out and be in nature. having an opportunity to be on those trails, I think is kind of a priority, I would think, rather than, a gymnasium.
Right.
Of course, that's just my opinion. We'll see what the community says about that.
So again, yeah, what's the scale of play look like that complements trail use, natural environment, in essence, a field that sort of functions as a forested meadow. So, how do we stay true to all of that, and consider play?
Well, that's why I was saying, budget-wise, if people are not real supportive of a lot of gymnasium kind of things to be playing on, can some of that money be devoted to the trail system, to make either maybe more connections like what Chris is talking about, or what trails we do have to at least put them in better shape so they're used better, or more often.
Yep.
What do you have? We have like $100,000, I think, don't you?
No, right now within the budget for the park, we have $300,000.
Oh,
But again, that's not necessarily, the goal is not to spend that all on this play area project, right?
Right.
So it's this idea of what does this first phase look like to complete this year, and then how does this feedback, how does this ongoing engagement help drive what a future phase might be.
and some of that money's going to the consultant, I assume, as well, right? Or is that separate?
No, it would go to the consultant. It would go towards design fees, permitting fees. We have the pleasure of spending permit fees. So yeah, that money goes a lot of different places.
Okay.
It's not just buy and play equipment.
Any other questions or comments on Hillside, Chris?
Yeah, sorry. So another thing that's probably going to be important to consider is the access for maintenance. There's just not very good access for vehicles and equipment there, which may point towards some of those more natural type structures like the logs and,
Yeah, letting existing grade maybe support sliding and playing and netting. You're absolutely right. Yep. Long-term maintenance, access to maintenance is another key part to scaling this play experience to the right level.
Good opportunity for a zip line all the way down to Sunset. And I've got
You do that, you're gonna attract a bunch of people. Seriously, parents will bring kids to wherever there's like a new and unique piece of play equipment. So keep it in mind.
Right.
Yep.
Anything else, anyone on this one? Not seeing anything. Looks like it's Blackberry.
All right. Again, really appreciate the feedback here. Similarly, I will share my screen. Please verify I did it right again.
Looks good.
Okay. So as I was saying earlier, each of these sites is similar in terms of the goal of incorporating play, but unique in both its location and I think some of the issues and opportunities that we need to and want to get community feedback on. If you're familiar with the Sammamish Cove area, Blackberry Park, boy, I wish I could give you the street number, but I don't have it memorized. Tucked right into a residential area. This was a King County parcel. It wasn't even a park parcel. It was a King County owned single-family residential parcel for decades. The neighborhood around it began to incorporate it and park elements into it, and it really became a neighborhood park because of community support. This was transferred to us in 2017, and we began to engage with the community as to what they want to see happen, how they want to see this site managed. The meeting on Thursday night will again start with Mayor Pauly giving some welcome comments. Agenda will look relatively similar, though we don't have a huge amount of community engagement to sort of base as a starting point. But again, we'll start with this idea of analysis of the site. What do we know of the environmental conditions? What do we know of some of the background? In this case, what the neighborhood sort of invested through their own sweat equity into this site, and how do we analyze play? How do we analyze, really, quite frankly, what you'll see is how constrained this site is to incorporating play. We'll go through some of the similar exercises, a variety of play. What you'll see in those varieties of play in this slide are going to look a little different. There are some natural elements that we want to sort of draw out, but also some more sort of traditional play spaces given the constraints of the site. We'll talk through, again, these polling opportunities to get real-time analysis or feedback from the community. We'll start with another context map. Here you go, I could have waited. Southeast 42nd and 191st is where you'll find Blackberry Park. As I said earlier, tucked right into the residential neighborhood. Similar to what we did with Hillside, we'll talk through the environmental requirements that any and all projects need to go through. Invite opportunity for feedback as we talk through that. Again, this idea of blending neighborhood feedback on the scope of the project, but also neighborhood feedback on environmental concerns at the same time we're going through these neighborhood conversations. This slide will really, I think, speak to some of that background and history. There was an original play structure that was there before 2006. The community neighborhood led effort replaced that play area in 2006. There's a concrete pad area that was a basketball hoop. There's still a basketball hoop in the corner. You can see in that photo there. There's a gazebo that was installed. King County transferred it to us, so I was wrong, 2016, late 2016. It was November, December when that happened. We had hosted a barbecue out there on site in 2017 to meet the neighbors, to talk about the transfer of this property from the county to the city. At that time, the neighborhood had some concerns about the play area. This is a play area that doesn't meet national sort of public play area safety standards. It's not such a risk that we felt like we needed to take it down at the time, but felt like we really need to look and consider what a replacement of that play area looks like. Again, an opportunity to invite more feedback on Thursday night. What are they most proud of? What changes? What other information would they like us to know? Context map that sort of talks through some of these existing elements and where they exist on site. Again, some visuals for context. You start looking at setbacks and start sort of inviting this conversation around some of the challenges that exist with this site as we look at incorporating park elements into it as a true park. You'll see where the existing play area is in this corner when you look at permitted required setbacks. We have a play area that is, to put it bluntly, a little too close to the edge of the property. So some of these things we need to look at as we think of incorporating new play area into the site. Want to talk with the community and get feedback on some of that. This then leads into really this conversation of how do we consider play needs, variety of locations within the site, but also not detracting from some of the other elements that exist within this park. This is really going to begin to talk and feel on Thursday night, really a conversation about trade-offs. For the want of a play area or a certain size play area, there's considerations that the neighborhood's really going to need to consider, and we want to be very considerate of and get community feedback on that before we go much farther with this project. Some of these edges and how this property relates and is so close to the neighbors is really important. The trellis, it's getting up in age. Is that something, again, the community feels really wedded to? Is that something we need to consider keeping? There's a big patch of non-native blackberries that exist on the other side of the park from this photo. If blackberries are a huge priority for this community, how might we consider accomplishing that without having wild invasive blackberries take up such a big part of the park? From there, we'll talk through, similar to what we did with Hillside, sort of go through this exercise of types of play. What are the priority types of play? You'll see some of these visuals that, again, as I was saying earlier, speak to natural features, but also look at some of the more traditional play type structures that we'll probably need to consider for such a small park and a small area, netting, climbing, etc. I won't spend a lot of time talking through this unless you have some questions. All of this is really going to lead to some of these, I think, the important conversations that we really want to have with the neighborhood on Thursday night and get their feedback are these ideas of layout, both size and scale of play area. And when you start looking at considerations given setback requirements, etc., what are some of the trade-offs that we're going to need to consider by incorporating a new play area to the site? You'll see as I go through these, we really want to get feedback on what happens when we look at different sizes of play areas and the net effect to the lawn and some of the other elements. So to look at, say, a play area that's similar in size, there was a swing that was on a tree back here that it was a hazard tree and something we needed to take down quite early when it was transferred. We know from that conversation there's interest in incorporating swings back into the park. Again, we'll get feedback, but to do a similar size play area, we really can't use that space. We'd have to look at another area within the park and let that space perhaps become lawn. So this idea of similar lawn, it just might need to be a different layout as we look at another play area. And then, like I was saying, this reality of trade-offs, to go to a bigger play space, we really start to impact the lawn area and want to get some feedback from the neighborhood just as to what their preference might be, and not make assumptions. So it really, this conversation, unlike Hillside, where it's really incorporating into the natural area, as we look at size and scale of play and replacing what is a non safety standard residential play area, to bring a public play area in, and how do we do that in a way that still complements and meets the right mix and proportion of elements that this community would like to retain within the park. So this really becomes the last slide of our conversation with Blackberry and trying to get feedback on, no real net lawn reduction, and then the bigger the play area, you'll see there's an impact to the lawn space that is remains available within the park. So again, this idea of site, constraints of the site, and what things we need to consider as a community and as a city, incorporating play into the park. So thoughts, questions, comments?
Go ahead, Danielle.
So this is one where this is a neighborhood that is nice and flat with big, wide street, and kids bike, and travel, freely, right? They're not constrained by the hills of the rest of our city. And so I think it's important to look at this park in the context of also looking at Muirwood Park and then South Cove. and looking at them together as far as what amenities there are. And this kind of reminds me of when we did Muirwood Park. It was similar. I think we took that. I can't remember when we did those renovations, but sort of strikes me as very similar to that. And I would think that we would want to have something different than what we have at the other parks in the neighborhood where kids can easily travel to. So a different reaction than. I would also be curious, is that park in South Cove proper? Like, do the people who are adjacent to it have access to the South Cove Park?
I don't know. In terms of their private neighborhood park with South Cove, I'm not sure exactly where those boundaries are. I know there are a number of, depending on timing of when each residential area was, there are some HOA parks that certainly support a number of the neighborhoods.
So I would be curious going into that meeting to know like how important green space is, like open field space, because I kind of feel like a bunch of those, a lot of that neighborhood is that, like, that space is probably satisfied with the big grassy park that they have. But I don't know. But that's what I would want to know.
No, I appreciate that. And that's part of, I think what we're trying to get to with this is understanding those trade-offs. And quite frankly, another option is, do we consider not having a play area at this park, right? I mean, that's something that we would certainly invite if that is the feedback that comes from the community.
Yeah, it could just be a place to congregate, with benches and picnic tables and not necessarily a play area. So where is the closest park to this one? Is it South Cove? Is that the other closest one to this?
South Cove's a private park. In terms of a public park, Muirwood Park would be the closest public park.
Or Timberlake, which is down in that same area too, which is an Issaquah Park. But
yeah, Muirwood's closer. Muirwood is more of a neighborhood park with a tennis court and play area. Timberlake, you're right, is also in this neighborhood more as a natural open space park.
Right.
Yep.
And I think someone else, I don't know if anyone else on this call lives there, but I mean, the South Cove Park is well used by that neighborhood, and it's a really big, it's a very big grassy park with lots of points of access, and it goes down to the lake. And so my sense is that that's where people congregate if they're going to get together with their neighbors or hang out or have a picnic.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, from RSVPs, both of these meetings are going to be quite well attended. And we really want to reinforce too, doing these virtually gives us the chance, as I said earlier, to record it and then really invite those that attend invite your neighbors to watch the presentation and give us feedback as well. And so I think we're optimistic we're going to get really good neighborhood feedback to understand. I think your point's very well taken, Danielle, and I would agree, right? This park has a complementary function to those other public spaces. And so what experience does the community want for this park relative to those other ones around it that are maybe a little bit more accessible, and there's a different sort of degree or set of questions as opposed to complementary play at Hillside Park, right? I mean, they're play areas, but they're really, as I was saying at the beginning of this, there's some uniqueness to the community feedback that we really need for both of these.
I'll also say, I think that to the extent that I think it's really important to know before that meeting where that park is. So like if that park does not actually serve, like if it's in a neighborhood that doesn't have access to the private park, then I would hope that we'll listen more to the people who don't have access, right? Who need this as a public park. So I think that's sort of an important piece. That would be an important piece of my analysis of what the right thing to do there is.
Right.
Is it possible to show that on the map, Jeff, where that is in relationship? Not necessarily right now, but for the meeting this week?
We could try. I think within that context map, if there is a way we can readily get definition and understand which residential properties have access to South Cove, which do not, we can certainly do our best. I think either way, I think the point is very well taken in understanding who is this park serving, right? This park's going to serve different people to different scales, and how do we make sure we keep that in mind.
Any other questions, comments? Not seeing anything. Any talk about changing the name? Or
No. We broached that at the barbecue in 2017, and Blackberry has there's a strong affection for that park. So
it's a heritage site. What you're saying, man?
yeah.
I thought all parks were supposed to go through the naming committee process.
Well, it would if we were going to, move to change the name. But if the community likes the name and it's got a historical element already built in, I guess it can just stay what it is.
Yeah, I would say, Jeremy, that this was already a functioning park when it was transferred to us.
And is that what it was called when King County had it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Except it had a lot more blackberries back in those days, didn't it?
You could call every park around here Blackberry Park.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, wild parks.
So I appreciate the chance to give you this sneak peek. In general, I guess I'll just pose the question as I close this. Approach is similar to what we've done in the past, but knowing that we're going to be having neighborhood engagement both for the environmental checklist, but also just scoping the project. I think what we're going to try and show in these two conversations this week is blending those conversations, not having separate neighborhood meetings about the project and then about environmental conditions, but really allowing the engagement to talk about both, because it's vitally important that those are talked and really spoken through and thought through in the same vein, same conversation.
Anything else, anybody? Looks like that's a wrap on that, Jeff.
Okay, well, we'll let you know how it goes and anticipate our March meeting, bringing this back. Like I said, our next engagement would be in April, so it'll give us a chance in March to only share feedback with you, but begin to talk through and really discuss what we heard from those neighborhood meetings. So thank you.
And Jeff, one last question. What's the budget for this one that you have?
I'll need to confirm it. I want to say it's just south of, it's like 250,000. Again, for the site, for the park itself. Yep.
Right. So less than Hillside.
A little bit less. Yep.
But a lot smaller park too, so that'll go a long ways.
Right.
Okay, I guess that's it for that part of it. And so it looks like I'm on show here for chairperson's report, and I have several things which I'll try and go through quickly. Some of which is just to bring you up to date on a couple meetings that I attended. So I attended the February 12th wayfinding meeting that Jennifer put together with a number of people in the community. You'll be hearing more about that. Our main focus at that particular meeting was to get back re-engaged again. It's something that we've been working on in 2000, losing track of time now, 2019. We had several meetings with that project, and then everything got on hold last year. So at least you're going to start the momentum back up again. Basically, we were working on 4 different designs of signage This is going to be introduction signs to the city and certain core points, and then there'll be a bunch of other wayfinding signs that are much smaller to designate specific areas. So there'll be more on that, but we came to an agreement on at least the 4 designs to go out to the community to get their feedback, and that'll be kind of the next part of that project. I attended the Kokanee Work Group quarterly meeting on January 27th, and a couple highlights that I wanted to point out from that meeting was King County Parks is undergoing a project to introduce 9 interpretive signs along the East Lake Sammamish Trail. So that's something that's coming into the early future. They showed one of the signs at the meeting. The one in particular was kind of a wildlife signage, but there's going to be a variety of them. It's going to be really good signs that King County's putting together. Trout Unlimited is still raising funds for the Urban Wildlife Refuge Partnership, which is still kicking around, something that I was involved in a number of years ago when it first kicked off. It's kind of gone into nowhere land over the last year or two, but part of that is because of funding. So anyway, Trout Unlimited has put together some funding, still gathering more funding, but they're going to have a part-time staff person by the name of Derek Stab, who's actually going to head that up. So there'll be more on that in the future. The 2020-2021 Kokanee counts came in at 82. Kokanee, which is still really low, but it's still a little better than what's happened over the last couple years, so there's some encouragement. Emergency plan is still in place to prevent Kokanee from going extinct. And the last part of the KWG, Mountain to Sound Greenway actually had a nice presentation where I think I had mentioned earlier, not sure when, that they had a $1.5 million grant that they have been working over the last several years in partnership with some other agencies to put together a restoration of Issaquah Creek that runs all the way through the park, all the way to the lake. It encompasses actually 55 acres. They've actually now completed that design plan, and they're now moving into the permit stage. The anticipation is in the summer of next year, 2022, is when they anticipate engagement to start working on that project. And it's expected to last for 3 to 5 years. So that's going to be quite an effort, I think. One of the last, this is something that I'll probably introduce, and I'll talk to Jeff a little bit about this in our agenda planning meeting. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Bill Way. He's actually on the board of Friends Lake Sammamish State Park. He, along with a trail committee, has been working over the last 3 years to put together a trails plan for the state park to run with the master planning effort that the state is working on currently with that. And so that's going to be FLIS's contribution, is to present this trails plan. I think Jeff may have just gotten a recent copy of it, is what Bill had said. And so I'm going to try and see if we can arrange to maybe have Bill at our next meeting or the one after, depending upon what other things are going on, to show you what that plan looks like, because he'd like to show what that is. It's a pretty extensive program or project to the tune of almost $10 million. So it'll be real interesting to see how the state addresses that challenge. But master planning is a long-term effort, and so you really have to look at it like that. And so that trail plan is probably something that'll be phased in over the course of many years, really. And lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about board staffing and applications. So this is the end of term right now, coming up at the end of April for Danielle and for Jeremy. And so we'd certainly like to have you continue on, and if you so choose, the applications are actually due to the city by 5 o'clock, February 28th. Let me know if you need a link to that, and I'll be happy to send it to you. The city has put that out a couple weeks ago, so you may have actually already seen that somewhere along the lines. Joe has moved on, so we do have one additional area there to fill, and we're still trying to determine what the status of April is going to be for this year. So that's kind of it about board staffing. Jeff, you any comments about that?
No, thanks for bringing that up, Brad. I shared an email with those members. Carl as well, his appointment is up. It was actually up last year, and then as part of the COVID extension. So I let all 5 of those board members know, encourage them to apply by the 28th. And then this will go through a similar interview and mayor appointment process. So thanks for bringing that up as well.
Okay. So that's all I had for the chair report. And Jeff, what do you have for director's report?
Thanks, Brad. A couple of things. First, to, I guess, continue on in that thought of board appointments. You other board members, it would be great, don't need it right now, but it'd be great to identify 2 park board members to serve on an interview group as we head into that in March. So just be thinking about that. Shoot me an email if you're interested, or shoot Brad an email. A couple of project-related items. First, Brad, you had mentioned the wayfinding park sign design process. That is getting kicked off again. We intend to bring that update to you as the full park board in March at our March meeting. As Brad mentioned, he, as the park board chair, serves on a steering committee that had begun work in 2019. COVID pushed a pretty big pause on that effort. They met again this last month. That effort is really a goal to create a more standardized approach to park signage, facility signage, trail signage, wayfinding signage within the city. We'll be embarking on a public engagement effort probably this spring and summer to really garner public feedback on some concepts. The reality is this sign will probably be a meshing of these concepts. It's not meant to be a sort of forced choice. It has to be one of these 4. So again, we'll have a little bit more time to focus as an informational discussion with all of you as park board members in March. We'll also have some ideas on what public engagement could look like later this spring and summer on that effort. So it'll be great to get some of your feedback on that. Next item, the dog park tour. Just wanted to let you all know we made our first transition from the field at Pickering Barn on February 1st. We closed that up and the tour moved to Squaw Valley Park, where the dog park exists and will remain until the end of May. Likely next month too. I'd love to have a little bit more information to share with you as I'm getting feedback from the park operations team as to what sort of condition Pickering Field was left with. We did some what I would call aggressive top dressing with adding some sand through. If you recall, January was a pretty historically wet month, but how that field, how that space bounces back will be something we're already paying really close attention to, and I'll have a little bit more information to share with you in March now that we've made that one change. Buying the extra materials was really helpful. We were able to set up the space at Squawk before we closed the space at Pickering. So feedback we heard from the community was really positive there. I was up here at work over the weekend and going by on Saturday. The Squawk Valley space was really, really well used. It was great to see. So the news is certainly getting out, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback and appreciation from the community on this interim effort. So more information coming your way on that. Third item, programmatically, I mentioned to you last month as we've been navigating COVID recovery, we've been really getting creative with our recreation facilities and programs. One area was our youth basketball, historically what's been a league. Happy to announce through a lot of great work by Jared and Lisa and Brian and the community center and athletics team. We started our youth basketball program last Saturday, putting students in safe pods with volunteer coaches. We have 650 young Issaquah residents, boys and girls, that are taking part in a modified youth basketball program over the next 8 weeks. So safety is a high priority for that program, but certainly seeing the response from the community and creating these safe opportunities for kids in our community to recreate, get on the court, have a chance to socialize and be a part of something was a high priority. And so really applaud the efforts of our recreation team in making that a reality. Jeremy, you have a question about that?
Not a question, more of a comment. So I'm one of those volunteers that has been blessed with coaching one of these teams. And first initial thoughts on it is it was pretty good. Most of the kids, the kids I have were all 8, 9-year-old, third graders. They wore their masks, didn't have any issues with the masks and stuff. The one comment I did have was that the teams are remarkably large. I have 20 kids on a basketball team. It's the most I've ever had. So, that was one issue. And then I was going to send a note to Jared. We don't have the jerseys yet, and we're not supposed to be, using pennies and switching pennies in and out because of the COVID. Same with those wristbands. So whenever we'd scrimmage, kids didn't know who they were guarding or anything. So 20 kids, it was kind of tough. But other than that, I think it, went pretty good. There was a person there at the door stopping everybody, doing their little thermometer check on the forehead going in, asking some question, like a questionnaire, and then we had enough space on the floor, so that wasn't an issue. But there'll be some kinks we have to work through for sure. A lot of the kids were a little disappointed that they don't get to play other teams. But then when I told them you have as many kids on this one team as 3 or 4 other teams, we told them we'd do some sort of game type of thing.
Yeah, well, Jeremy, thank you so much for coaching. And you're right, the pods were intended to be bigger. The idea is being able to have some inter-squad play amongst those 20 kids. I certainly hope there's some additional volunteer coaches that are helping you out. I know that certainly was a goal and a need as well. But that's great feedback. Make sure we get that to Jared as well.
Yeah, I think we're just waiting for the jerseys. I think once we have the jerseys, it'll be a much more smooth. You can have them. They're supposed to be reversible, so you can flip the colors and whatnot. So.
Yep. The year of COVID, the year of being nimble, certainly. Last item I had was just to follow up on our turf replacement project at Central Park Pad 3. Thank you again for your feedback and the discussion we had last month. I took that information and provided an update to City Council at the last council meeting on the 16th. Really good feedback from council in terms of the approach and the recommendation that we took in pivoting to more of a natural infill product. That project approval, excuse me, will be going to City Council next Monday, not next Monday, the following Monday, March 1st. That is next Monday, March 1st for approval, and then we'll get contracts set and get that project scheduled later this year in 2021. So again, really appreciate the discussion we had last month. Your feedback was very helpful in shaping that project. That's the end of my report, Brad. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, is there going to be enough fencing to set up at the community center seamlessly? Or is there going to be a break in May for the dog park?
No, same thing applies. So we're able to hopscotch. So we will, end of May, we will set up the fourth dog park tour site at the community center before we close Squaw Valley Park. Yep.
Good. Any other questions for Jeff?
I just have a question about the dog park. So curious if there have been challenges or kind of what, like, initially, are there any lessons learned from the first go round?
Not an exhaustive list, no. I think recognition of this dog park tour is not going to alleviate all of the off-leash dog needs in the community, right? I think it's confirmation of that. But yeah, I think to go with the size and scale of any of these interim parks, Danielle, I think it's recognition and confirmation. It's probably not meeting the entire community need for a single space of this size, less than an acre size.
Are they pretty crowded? Is it pretty crowded? Have they been crowded or?
Good question. No, I haven't been there at all times, but certainly as I observed Pickering, I think there was that size space, which was the smallest of the 3 tour sites, probably comfortably accommodated, I'd say upwards of a dozen dogs and owners. If it got any more than that, it probably started to feel a bit crowded. Squawk is a little bigger space. Again, when I went by on Saturday, I would say there were probably 15 plus dogs out there, very comfortably spaced.
Okay. And then I'll just echo, like, I'm so glad you guys are starting the basketball. My kids have outgrown that stage, but anything that we can do to provide an opportunity for kids to recreate and socialize, it is desperately needed in this community. So thank you.
In reference to the dog park, I think it's going to be good here somewhat maybe towards the end of the year after the 3rd phase of this to start getting some feedback from the people, to help us, with, some of the issues that we had any concerns with for the permanent dog park. So at some point, it'd be nice to put out a survey to those people or know who it is that's, that used it and what they liked, what they didn't like. The more we can get, the better.
Agreed.
And also along those lines, people's memories are short sometimes. So it might be nice, like, now, and maybe you've already done this, but now that you've transitioned from Pickering to Squawk, to ask people what their thoughts were on Pickering, and then kind of each time, right? And so, like, as you go later, you'll get people comparing them to the different ones, but you don't want to lose that input on Pickering.
Right.
If we wait for a couple sessions, then you might only get people talking about the community center one.
Agreed. Hey, Ryan, looks like you're up.
All right. Well, since last park board meeting, Youth Advisory Board has met twice. Both of those meetings were primarily work meetings. We have 10 different groups that work on different types of projects, and usually they meet outside our scheduled meetings. But since people have been pretty busy in January with finals, we decided we wanted those meetings just to work on our different projects. In terms of events, one group put on a Valentine's Day craft sort of thing over Zoom. It was sort of a teaching thing. They taught the kids how to make crafts. And that was in earlier February. And other than that, we have a meeting tomorrow that's going to be another work meeting since people were sort of off on break, not really working on stuff, relaxing. And beyond that, we plan to have more events in March and April.
Great. Thanks for that. And thank you for joining us to inform us about that. Appreciate that greatly. Jeff, you got anything from the mayor?
Nothing new other than, again, a big thank you. I know as we forwarded the Central Park Turf project to council, she too was very appreciative of the discussion we had at our last park board meeting. So on behalf of the mayor, big thanks.
Anybody else have any other business or announcements? Looks like we're winding down to closure here. So thanks everybody for making it tonight, and keep yourself safe, and we'll do this again next month. So with that, meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Al.
Brad.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.